What if I told you that 3 lighthouse keepers mysteriously vanished from a remote island in Scotland, and to this day, more than 100 years later, no one really knows what happened to them? This is the very strange disappearance of the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers. On December 15th, 1900, the steamboat Arctur was making its way to a port in Leith, Scotland. The crew was on high alert, carefully navigating the waters of Scotland's Outer Hebrides. Sailors are always cautious in this area, not just because of its treacherous waters and unpredictable weather, but also they're about to pass the Flannan Isles. The legends and folklore surrounding this place are enough to keep anyone, even experienced sailors, on edge as they pass by. To really set the scene of what we're talking about, the Flannan Isles, also known as the Seven Hunters, are this remote, uninhabited cluster of islands, and the largest of these, Eilean Mor, is home to a stone lighthouse that was built in 1899 in the ruins of St. Flannan's Chapel, a 7th century church that is said to draw visitors to their knees in prayers. Even those who aren't religious feel an overwhelming urge to just get on their knees and pray. And because of this, over time a ritual emerged. People would circle the outside of the chapel on their knees while praying before entering. But Eilean Mor's reputation doesn't end with the chapel. For centuries, shepherds brought their flocks to graze on the island's lush grass. According to legend, sheep grazing on the island would sometimes give birth to twins, and sickly animals were said to miraculously recover. While this was great for shepherds, the island's eerie energy was not. Shepherds always left before nightfall, fearful of watchful spirits said to roam the island after dark. So as you can see, the Arctur crew is very careful as they pass Eilean Mor, but something immediately catches their attention. The lighthouse light is out. This isn't just unusual, it's incredibly dangerous. The Flannan Isles are notorious for their rocky coastlines, often hidden by dense fog, and the lighthouse is the only safeguard standing between passing ships and disaster. What's even stranger is there's no immediate sign of distress. Typically, lighthouse keepers, not just on Eilean Mor but everywhere, would suspend black spheres over the side of the lighthouse to signal if something was wrong. But the signal isn't there and the light is just out. When the Arctur docks in Leith 3 days later, the crew immediately reports their concerns to the Northern Lighthouse Board. In response, the board dispatched the relief ship Hesperus, commanded by Captain James Harvey, to deliver a new lighthouse keeper, Joseph Moore, and to further investigate. But severe weather delayed the Hesperus, stretching the journey for days. It wasn't until December 26th that Captain Harvey and the crew finally reached the Flannan Isles. As they neared Eilean Mor, Harvey signaled with the ship's horn several times and fired a flare, expecting the keepers, 43-year-old James Ducat, 40-year-old Thomas Marshall, and 28-year-old William MacArthur, to respond and meet them at the dock, but there was no response and the flagstaff was completely bare. These men were responsible for ensuring the light and fog signal operated flawlessly, working in isolation for weeks at a time. They spent their nights taking turns in the light room while daylight hours were dedicated to cleaning and maintenance. It was a lonely job, and while many of the men had families, their extended absences could last over 6 weeks, so someone should have been there and no one was. Notably, just weeks before this incident, Thomas Marshall had reportedly called for better safety measures, expressing concerns about the dangers of their work and the protocols they had in place. It was also said that James Ducat had been reluctant to take the post, as he had a wife and 4 children depending on him. But the Northern Lighthouse Superintendent Robert Moorhead had persuaded him to stay due to his extensive experience, and William MacArthur was only there because he picked up the shift after another lighthouse keeper was sick. So Captain Harvey drops a boat and Joseph Moore rows ashore, climbing the steep steps to the lighthouse, and as he approaches, he notices 3 large black birds perched on the cliffs just staring at him. The lighthouse was eerily silent and appeared abandoned. A clock had stopped, an uneaten meal of cold meat, potatoes, and pickles sat on the table, and a chair had been knocked over. The beds were empty, unmade, and left behind was one of the keepers' oilskins. This was essential for protection against the elements, and it appeared that one of the men, William MacArthur, had abruptly left without his gear while the others had gone out more prepared. Everything pointed to the keepers rushing out of the lighthouse abruptly, leaving everything as it was. After finding nothing, Joseph returned to the Hesperus to alert Captain Harvey, who sent 2 more men ashore to assist in a thorough search. They scoured the lighthouse and the island from end to end, but found no sign of the keepers. On the east landing, everything was left untouched. The ropes were in proper places, just as they should have been. But on the west landing, they discovered evidence of a storm. A supply box had been smashed open, its contents scattered across the ground. Iron railings along the pathway had been bent and twisted. A section of the railway track used to haul supplies to the lighthouse had been torn from its concrete foundation. And this massive rock, estimated to weigh over a ton, had been displaced. Even the ropes and tackle were displaced, just laying on the rocks. Joseph later wrote in his account that he and another man went to the light room where everything was in proper order. The lamp was clean and the fountain was full. Depending on the account, Joseph himself, or Joseph and several other men, agreed to stay behind and keep watch on the island while Captain Harvey sent a telegram to the Northern Lighthouse Board informing them of the situation. He said it appeared a storm had taken over the island and something tragic had likely happened to the keepers. The superintendent, Robert Moorhead, who had last seen the keepers during a routine inspection on December 7th, arrived 3 days later to investigate, and when he arrived, he could tell that Joseph Moore was nervous, like he knew something was terribly wrong. Inside the lighthouse, Robert found the logs written by Thomas Marshall, and the entries from the days leading up to the disappearance were very strange. On December 12th, Thomas wrote of severe winds, unlike anything he had experienced in his 20 years of service. He also noted that James Ducat had been unusually quiet, and William MacArthur, who was known to be extremely tough, had been crying. On December 13th and 14th, Thomas recorded that the storm continued to batter the island and that all 3 men had been praying. But the final log entry, dated the morning of December 15th, simply stated that the storm had ended, the seas were calm, and God is over all. To Robert, this seemed like an open and shut case. He concluded that the men had likely faced extreme weather, ventured out to secure equipment and supplies, and were tragically swept away by a massive wave. Here's the strangest part. During the days Thomas Marshall wrote about the relentless storms and terrifying conditions, weather reports indicated calm seas and clear skies. No one else in the area, passing ships or those on nearby land, reported any such weather. From their vantage points where Aylin Moore was visible, everything was fine, but this completely contradicted what Joseph, Robert, and the other men found on the island. When Robert visited Aylin Moore for a routine check on December 7th, everything was in perfect order. The keepers had their systems running smoothly, the light and fog signal were operational, and there were no signs of any distress. So why, just days later, would the keepers begin writing about storms so severe that Thomas Marshall described them as the worst he'd experienced in over 20 years? How could things have gone from calm and orderly to catastrophic when no one else in the area reported any storms during that time? Robert wrote in his official report that this mystery was nothing more than a tragic accident, but his explanation didn't sit right with anyone. Theories began to swirl. Some speculated that a giant sea serpent or rogue wave had taken the men away, and others wondered if the keepers had attempted to flee the island only to be swept out to sea. Then there was the idea of foul play. William MacArthur was known for having a short temper. He was tough, quick to anger. People couldn't help but ask, could he have snapped, attacked the others, and then thrown them off the cliffs? Was there a fight among the 3 that turned deadly? But here's what keeps coming back to me. The last log entry on December 15th, the one that said the storm is gone, all is calm, God is over all. If the storm had truly cleared by then, on the very day the Arctur passed by, why wasn't the lighthouse lit? If the men had been swept out to sea during the storm, how could they have written in the log that everything was fine that morning? It raises the question, was something supernatural at play? Did Aylin Moore's eerie history and isolation make the men see or believe something that wasn't there? Could the isolation combined with the island's unsettling reputation have driven them to madness? But even then, they weren't amateurs. They had each other for company, and some had been lighthouse keepers for decades without incident. So what was it about this island, the job, or that moment in time that pushed everything over the edge? If you have made it to the end of this video, I appreciate you for taking the time to sit down and listen to this case. Let me know all of your thoughts. I'm really interested to hear all of your theories. Do you think they were just swept out to sea by this giant wave or high winds, even when no one else reported the weather in the area? Do you think there was foul play involved? Or do you think there was a supernatural element to what happened to these 3 lighthouse keepers? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, let me know what other case you would like me to cover. Until then, I look forward to seeing you in another video.